in the Preface of life. We choose to live life to its fullest. Free and untethered, unencumbered, unrestricted, full on.
Amen.
Full on. In this moment right now, we choose to use the wings that we were given.
Yes.
We choose to fly. We choose to soar to new heights. We choose to explore terrain and territory too long ignored. We dare to dream possibilities unimagined before. We come here to unleash the most outrageous human potential.
Yes.
The genius within us. The pure capacity, the ability to do. As when Jesus said that God has not given us a spirit of fear, of timidity, but of power, but of love and a sound mind. The Greek dunamis. Not pure power over anything, but just pure capacity to do. So we come here and lend our consciousness. We come here to clean up karma. We come here to plant ourselves in fertile ground. We come here so that the seeds of promise can not only germinate, but blossom. We come here for the beloved community. Not just a far-off idea, but an ever-present reality, anchoring the highest of heaven right here on earth. It is real, and it is now. Anything and everything that stands in its way, we allow it to simply dissipate. No struggle, no fight, just let the light of truth dissipate it like the fog is lifted with the sun. There's nothing solid. You're just caught up in a mist and a fog. And we come here to see clearly. We are so grateful. We are so honored. We are so blessed. Just as we come to release, we come here to embrace. Anything that we need to know, anything that we need to understand, any new terrain that our heart needs to go through, any new perceptions or new paradigms that need the majesty of our attention, we do not hesitate to give. Thank you, Spirit. We declare this time together to be good and very, very good. We get out of the way, we allow it to be, and so it is. So it is. So good. So, how's everybody doing?
Very good.
Good. Good is good. Great is good. Well, you know what? If we were in another room, we could make that happen. Get you a recliner. We have enough of those to go around. I said we could get you a recliner.
Oh, don't worry about it. I just needed to tell you I was tired.
Okay. All right. We've had a lot of people with knee surgeries, and we're accustomed to moving the recliners around. You mind opening up one of those windows, please? Thank you. So, how's everybody doing?
Wonderfully well.
Wonderfully well. That's a good comment. Wonderfully well is good. Well, you know, it is what it is. With the technology and why the projector's MIA, you know, I don't know. And if any people, if we get any text or anything like that from anybody, just ask them to call in. Yeah, so they can do that. But we are recording and we are moving forward as though everybody, you know. Miss Barbara. Okay. Hi, Barbara.
Yay.
Hey. Good. So I can see you on Nate's screen. We're having a little projector problem, so we don't all see you, but I can see you there. And I'm just confirming that you see us fine.
I see you. Let me get to the gallery view here and see if I can see everybody.
Nobody else.
No, I only see you.
No, because you won't see anybody else. You're the only one online.
All right. I'm the only one.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So
It's all about you, baby.
No. It's all about all of us. That's what it's about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry. I'm going to have to cut out at 1. So I want to just kind of jump to it. We've been covering a lot of ground lately, and I haven't been giving you a lot of time to breathe. And when I was checking in this morning about going on and pressing on, what I got more was, let's just pause for a moment. Let's just pause for a moment and play a little catch up, and use this opportunity to really delve into some of those things that are coming up for you, some of the awarenesses, you know, some of the ahas. I've been having a lot of very interesting conversations with people lately who have been looking at some of the congressional hearings, and the subtleties and the things that are coming up, you know, in that I know have been part of the public discourse that I might, despite Spirit's orders, I might make reference to here or there if I think it would make a juicy illustration. But I want to just open it up now. If there are any either you know, questions, things that are mulling around that aren't quite, you know, landing yet, or if there are any epiphanies or things that you're wanting to share, because I know we're all getting smarter and we're all getting brighter and wiser and clearer as we go through this work. So does anybody have anything that you'd like to share or to bring up?
Sure. You don't really have to turn that because they can't see me anyway.
Well, recording.
Okay.
It's for the other people
Two things
later.
real quick. When you brought up the hearings, it's like people in Congress are not aware of the fact that Jon Stewart started this model of going back to the past and layering what people said 2 years ago with today. Do they think we do not know the hypocrisy that's going on? And Dick and I were talking about this today, and it occurred to me, this behavior would not be tolerated in 6th grade. It really would not be. And if this became acceptable behavior for our elected leaders who are supposed to be in charge of not just their voters, they're supposed to be in charge of the country. And it's just spectacularly mind-boggling that this has become the accepted discourse. And I'm not exactly sure how we bring it back other than to model a more politically correct is okay with me if it means you keep your mouth shut about stuff that is just over the line. It's over a line that wouldn't be accepted probably in 4th grade. It's just, I know there's a word for it, is once you expand the boundary into what used to be unacceptable behavior, it's got a name for it, then that becomes the norm, and then it expands again, and that becomes the norm, and it keeps spreading and spreading and spreading. But I want to figure out a way to bring it back, not to impinge on people's freedom, but to allow all of us to be free from this just vitriol that, anyway, the other thing that has been occurring to me, and it was really helpful, Rev D, when you had the people come and explain in evangelical background. And I don't mean this in a condemning way, because it was a big aha for me. The arrogance that you think you know what God wants. The arrogance is just, well, hubris is a better word, I think, than arrogance. The hubris that you think that your ideology is blessed by God and other people should be damned to eternal hell. I wasn't really brought up that way. So actually, when we moved to the suburbs, we went to the United Church of Christ, and I didn't know it was, kind of a non-denominational thing that doesn't go there. But how people are so certain that there's a ideological path that's going to lead you and people exactly like you to a heavenly place, and everybody else is going to be emoliated. It's just, again, I'm baffled that we ever got to that place. I know we got to that place, but I'm kind of baffled, because how could God love some of its creations more than others of its creations? And I've heard this from so many people who come into New Thought. Every religion they didn't get it until they walked into a New Thought church for the first time, and they said, now this makes sense. This makes sense, because it's not riddled with superiority and damnation. Anyway, that was a big aha for me, to understand it without just judging it. I know it sounds like I'm judging, but I really did understand that they believe it's the right way, and I do honor that it's their belief, but it sounds very full of hubris to me. And I mean in the Greek sense, that that's what brings people down, is the hubris.
Yeah. You gonna say something, Margaret?
It's been going on forever. It's just more of the same.
Yeah.
It's just like we looked at the cornerstone of the Confederacy. It was exactly the same thing. We are right and you are wrong, and you've been so misguided. Let me show you the way. I mean, and then to listen to the testimony, the vote yesterday about Saudi Arabia. Sorry, I could not believe it, that people in their right mind were doing that. I could not. I thought, here we go again. I cannot believe, I still can't believe it. I'm sorry, I'm still in shock that happened. I thought, here's the facts, here's what's going on. Come on, let's get with it. How can we allow it to happen? How can we allow it to happen?
One thing that I was thinking as you were talking is, in my lifetime, I think basically there have been 4 versions of the Bible. The King James, the American Standard, and I can't think the other one. And then, of course, the one Catholics use, and I'm not sure just what that is. But they all have they've used different words, and the words that are used are not direct translations of, I don't need to tell you this, because you give us sermons on it every now and then, explaining what the words meant back in the time of Christ. So how people think that they can go to the Bible and really find what God was saying when there have been so many versions of it is beyond me. My dad was a minister, to tell this little kind of joke, but I remember a sermon he preached back when I was 10 years old. And he was talking about how in the time when the women were wearing top knots and they thought that was just a terrible lifestyle. This one minister really didn't want the top knot. So he had a thing for his sermon, top knot come down. And it was from the Bible. It was, let the man on the house top knot come down. So, he could say, this verse is from the Bible, Literally it was, but it meant nothing at all about hairstyles in the 30s.
Actually, I'd like to add one more. This put down of Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren they are duly elected senators from large states. And I sometimes I feel one of the stories of my life is she was warned, yet she persisted. And that this is going on in the greatest deliberative body in the world, when she is doing nothing more than asking really, really intelligent, lawyerly questions, which is her job to do. And she is quieted twice in what, 10 days? Being told she's rude and hysterical.
Yep, it's sexist and it's racist.
Both. It's a twofer.
No, really, it's sexist, it's racist, and it's this. I had a long conversation about this today with somebody already, and that's why I said I wouldn't be surprised if I wind up talking about it a little bit.
Please do.
So in context, what we're talking about are these congressional hearings that are going on now, and that there are certain senators who are being singled out. That everybody's asking hard questions, but there's two women in particular, Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris, who's an African American woman who's the one lately has just been like really called out. and the portrayal of her as the angry Black woman, it's so classic. The angry Black woman, and not only the angry Black woman, but it's this way, and we talk about this from time to time, of this sleight of hand where you have people who are on trial for being the villain, if I'm using that victim, villain, hero triangle, but who want to flip the table so that they are now victimized. They are the victims now of these people who are attacking them, just trying to get the accountability. There would have never been those outbursts against the other men. There would have never been these complaints. You're making me nervous, and you're pushing me, and like it's you, and it's your fault that I don't have the answers that I want to share. But somehow or another, like, I can blame you. And it's so blatant that to have the news commentators and everybody talking about it is actually promising to me that it's not going unnoticed, and that people aren't just kind of accepting it, but really seeing it for what it is. And it demonstrates, once again, something that I've been trying to point out throughout this whole series, is the different realities. Same people doing their jobs, okay? But Kamala's gonna get a different reaction. All of this stuff that we have now about the presidency and the presidential authority and the office of the authority, where was all that when Obama was in office? Where was all of this reverence for the authority that this office held? Where was it then? And it really is different realities. And I'm glad that it's coming to the surface so that we can see it. Kaylin, when you said this is behavior that wouldn't be accepted in the 3rd grade, it wouldn't be accepted in the 4th grade. And you're absolutely correct. You are absolutely correct. Any boundaried environment that is deliberately designed for the upliftment and the success of all of its participants wouldn't tolerate this. And that includes the workplace, okay, where you do a lot of work. You've done a lot of work with corporate environment. And there has been this schism. As an activist, I've noticed for many, many years. If you take something like sexual harassment, it is not tolerated.
Correct.
It is not tolerated in academia.
That's right.
It is not tolerated in the workplace. It's just not. There are remedies. There's restitution. You have recourse. Soon as you walk out that door, you have nothing. Soon as you walk out that door, a woman doesn't even have the same protections in her home that she has in the workplace or out on the streets. We still don't have an Equal Rights Amendment. We still don't have it. And if you notice, anytime there's ever something really big, you take marriage equality, for example. The biggest international companies stepped forward and said, let's do this.
Absolutely.
From Marriott to IBM, Boeing, DuPont, Disney. I mean, it's like all like the really huge companies are saying, this is a no-brainer. That within our own companies, we have been giving domestic partnership benefits. Within our own companies, we have been recognizing, like all of our employees and whatnot, and that we would never do that discrimination because it doesn't even make good business sense.
Correct. It's
not even
profitable.
It's not even on a moral issue. It doesn't make good business sense. If I'm going to promote you and I'm going to move you to New York and you're partnered with her, I'm not going to squabble with you about whether I pay for her moving expenses as well as your moving expenses, or which part of the house is yours or like not yours. I'm not going to when you move and your marriage is legal in this state, but I'm going to move you to another state where your marriage isn't legal, and suddenly I'm going to not recognize that you're married anymore, or take away your insurance benefits. No, but that's what was happening politically. It's like companies like, are you kidding me? I was like, are you kidding me? So I agree with you 100%, Kaylee, that there is something that shifts when it becomes the public. Listen to what I'm saying. The battles that we were doing in the ballot box were issues that had already been won in so many other arenas. The whole discrimination, marriage equality stuff went, like I say, in business environments, it was like a no-brainer. But yet in the political arena, we're still acting like there's a question when those questions have already been resolved. And when you follow the trails, it's all the things that you just said. When you follow the trails and say, what's behind this stuff that's happening in the political and the public arena that's not acceptable in grade school, that's not acceptable in business environments? Like, what is that? And it is, everybody take a breath, it is that component that we refer to as religious. It's always that component that influences in there. You can separate church and state, but you can never separate religion and politics. there was a way that Reverend David Alexander put it last week, which has really been sitting with me, and it was just the most brilliant nugget. I had been referring to it as the spiritual crises of oneness. Okay. And he described it as the spiritual crises of inclusivity. And it was like, bang, that nailed it. The spiritual crises of inclusivity. Because the fact of the matter is the same judgment that we're sitting here saying, how can people do this and that? They are doing the same thing in reverse. They are looking at us and going, how can you?
Yes.
How can you think that your screwed up worldview about God and the universe and the creator, which according to us goes against everything that we know about in scripture? So what gives you the right to reinterpret? What gives you the right to throw away all of God's commandments and throw away everything that we know and act and pretend like the world is any different than what we have been saying that it is all along? Both sides, quote unquote, are standing on their sense of spiritual authority. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It'll just take me a sec, right?
Yeah.
It really is based on what we've been talking about, superiority.
Yes.
But it's also based on, this is a loaded word, but it's the right word, people being uppity. That's what this is. It's us being uppity. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of being considered uppity.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it really brings a tear to my eye because it's such a loaded word.
Well, yes, it is. And that's why that word sometimes is used about Black people, that they're uppity, because when they say that, it's because they're standing in a greater position of authority and entitlement.
That they don't deserve because of the color of their skin.
Exactly, which they don't deserve to share. So this really is a spiritual crisis. It's a crisis of inclusivity. And it is really stuck in the superiority, no matter how we want to look at it, the uppityness, the entitlement, whatever, that says, you're not supposed to be as good as I am. You're not supposed to have the same rights that I have. God does not love you as much as God loves me or us. And there's some beautiful letters in your deepest intent around that. Where Spirit just says, this is not true. I don't love some people more than I love others. And it even asks the questions. And so you ask me, how can you say that I love this one? How can you say I love that one? And it started rattling off some names, and it said, and this was so choice, and I missed it when it was being published. It said, what if I love Osama bin Laden? It said, what if I loved Saddam Hussein? And I didn't catch it until way after it was published, that difference between the present tense and the past tense. And by the time the book was published, we had executed Saddam Hussein. At that moment, Osama bin Laden was still alive. You say, what if? And then he made the spirit voice made this interesting observation. He says, you asked me, how can I do that? He said, but if I were a parent, you would be asking me, how could I not? If I were a parent, you would ask me, how could I turn my back on any of my children, no matter what they did or where they were? You would expect me to somehow in my heart love them all. No, I don't love any of you more. But that notion that somehow that is important to be loved more.
That's a good question.
Yes. Yes. What does that mean? And I have a little something that I want to say on that that's not going to be real popular.
So we get us.
Rada, want to say
Oh,
something?
I was just going to say that everything we're talking about, that paper you gave us
Mhm,
on the Confederacy,
mhm,
it spelled the whole thing out
mhm,
so brilliantly.
mhm,
You know, that was amazing.
mhm.
You know, in that one paper,
Isn't
all the different levels of it were right there.
Mhm. Yes. It was just amazing.
When that
Did you
paper
see
came
that
out,
one? You got that.
I don't know when that paper was written, but the letter started about 61. And
It was written in 61,
61, okay, so, and the Dred Scott was 57, I believe,
55,
55, so that's only like 6 years later,
exactly.
right? And the Dred Scott was the entire Supreme Court.
Mhm.
And I mean, this was not just a Southern.
No, this was not just a Southern thing at all, which is what we really, 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 really need to understand,
Yeah.
that it was the same consciousness everywhere. I mean, even, you know, I think I mentioned to you before that so my father was born in 22, my mom was born in 25. The house that's still the family house was built in 22. Now, my father was born and raised in Compton when Compton was still Jewish. So he grew up as a Black minority in a more, you know, white environment. My mother grew up in segregated South in Baton Rouge. Very different life experiences in that vein. So they get married in 47. They're young, fresh out of graduate school. I guess my dad was still in graduate school at the time. Back from the war, you know, the classic story. They become the baby boom parents, you know, the great generation and all the rest of that. Well, this house, that's the family house, specifically says in what's called the conditions, covenants, and restrictions that you cannot sell this house to colored people. That's in there. It was built in 22. They bought it in 56. You can never take that out. It's just not enforceable. But that's what it says. And California was the first state in 1948 to end the bans against interracial marriage, to ban and you know, let me be more specific, to ban the restrictions that prohibited white people from marrying outside their race. We'd be more specific about that. And they were the first ones, California, the same year in 48, to lift the ban on racial segregation in schools. But this is here. This is here. This is here in California.
Different world.
You know, it's not like just the South. It's a consciousness that's everywhere. And this who you can sell or can't sell to, that if you know anything about housing and what they call like redlining with mortgage loans and all the rest of that, that after the riots of the 60s, when they started building all of these suburbs, that quite often those developments came with those same restrictions that said you cannot sell the homes in these tracts to people who weren't white, which is how the suburbs got to be all white, because a lot of people were trying to get out there too because it was cheaper. But no, it was the same restrictions. I'm talking about the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. I mean, it's like close in. It's not far out there. But this notion about the better, And I, you know, it's one of those things where I hesitate to say it, but I really think that I have to put it in perspective. Just like Christianity got shanghaied along the way and doesn't have the true message of Jesus. That a lot of what we have as the background from Christianity comes from distorted views from Judaism. That there was a mentality on the part of some people, I'm not saying everybody, but a real mentality on the part of some people about being the chosen, about having the covenant with God in a way that was exclusionary. We can't intermingle. You know, we can't intermarry. You know, our stuff is going to get desecrated and diluted if somehow or another there's any kind of cross-pollination. So part of the way of making sure that that doesn't happen is to have a lot of restrictions on this interstuff, whatever it is, intermarrying, converting. We're not going to convert people. And Jesus was, and a lot of the other ones were like, well, wait a minute, if we really do have this light, so to speak, let's share it. Everybody needs some of this light. That the rest of us don't believe that this much light was just for some of us. What I'm saying is that battle has been going on for a very long time. And the other thing about these Judeo roots within the Christianity was this notion of a collective God. And this is something that we really miss on the political arena. Most liberals and progressive people believe in an individual God. They believe that, like, your life is between you, sort of like, and the Creator. And I personally am not held accountable for you and your life. That if there is a judgment day, so to speak, or if there's some karma or something, it's the individual. It's the individual. This is an individual relationship, and it's an individual covenant. That was not so from a theological, cultural standpoint, historically, in Judaism. That wasn't that uncommon with a lot of other indigenous kinds of people or tribes or whatnot, of this sense that God is blessing us collectively. That what happens to us as a nation is going to be dependent upon how much we collectively obey the commandments. About how we collectively, so this notion of posterity and prosperity and abundance and good favor in all of that was deeply tied into how much you thought God approved of what you all were doing or not doing. Thus, any non-conformity was a threat, not just a threat individually, but you're gonna bring us all down. If you go this way, then the whole society is going to be weakened, and we're somehow or another going to be less in God's favor, but even worse, perhaps punished in some kind of way, that something bad or whatnot will happen to us. And it then became a lot more about policing and conforming and making sure that people are obeying the commandments so that we collectively can prosper and won't experience the sort of wrath of God, so to speak. So it was less about like being cast into hell, as it was more about the here and the now, like hard times in the here and the now, like being out of favor now. Okay. And I'm not trying to be anti-Semitic by saying this. You're saying there are these different things that came together, so it became like a perfect storm. If you have that theology, but then it gets twisted with an imperialistic, colonialistic Roman Empire that politically and already has this supremacy, hierarchy, we're better, we get to dominate everything. The Jews weren't trying to convert everybody, but the Romans were. So it's like they took this sacred text and some basic ideas and flipped the switch and supersized it to such a way that it just became this very unholy alliance under whose pressure and paradigms we're still living. We're still under this cloak. And we in the United States now are trying to replace the Roman Empire. That just as we looked at these Confederacy documents, if you read any of that stuff when we were talking about before from the New American Century, the deep neoconservative think tank that Rumsfeld and Cheney and Wolfowitz and all of them were involved in, it stated specifically, like when the Cold War ended, this was our opportunity to become the world's sole superpower. And that it was incumbent upon us to take that advantage. And we still even speak that language. The leaders of the free world. Like God has ordained us to be the ones to control everybody and to rule over everybody, and that our presidency is the most important position on the planet. And God bless America. It reeks.
What was the name given to there was that movement up the Hudson River. I think it was kind of a Dutch Christian sect where if you had a lot of money, it was a sign that God, it was a sign of God is favor.
Yeah.
There were, and that was very heavily ingrained in that period of time, in our colonial period and the period after.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, is it a question or stretch?
It's a question. Oh, okay.
It's both.
Oh, okay.
Barbara has a comment or a question, actually. Isn't it related to scarcity thinking, where there's not enough for all of us and more is always better?
Yes, it is.
I was talking about that when you mentioned wanting to be in favor, or does God love us more? The thinking that there's only so much and there's not enough for all of us. So let's make sure that we're better than so we can get more of. And it's a real fear-based, separation-based consciousness. And I think that that's what all of this is right now, is that a consciousness is trying to emerge. And and all of these things that we call shocking have been there all along, and it's just that they're out in front of us, right in front of our face now. And I think that we can be shock absorbers.
Yes, we can. There's no question about it. And I think it was the point that Kaylee was trying to raise earlier. We have to draw the line. We keep crossing these invisible lines of civility. That if you are going to have a democracy, you can try to reduce it to political correctness if you want, but there has to be a healthy respect. There has to be an openness and a willingness to hear each other out, to compromise, to try to work together. You know, even in the Supreme Court, there's the dissenting opinion. You know, if you don't agree, you're not silenced. If you don't agree, you're not shamed. And your opinion is as much a matter of record as anybody else's opinion. And this way in which the values have gotten so skewed. When you say what would be acceptable in 4th grade, and I have to go back here again. I'm sorry, just the racist entitlement of it. That if Black people did this stuff, oh my God. If a Black man was talking about grabbing women by their, you know, and because I can, because I'm rich, or I mean, any of this stuff, it would just, or body wrestling and slamming down the reporters, or and then get elected and not go to jail. I mean, it's like, whoa! It blows. It's like it just blows my mind, the kind of double standards, you know, of it all. And at some point, and I do believe that it's happening, but what's really important though is that we can't stoop to the same level to prove the point.
Right.
We can't be just as foul-mouthed and berating and, you know, denigrating to those that we think are doing that to prove that it's wrong. We can't. And that's where the idea of real inclusion has to include everybody, where there has to be some compassion or whatnot in our heart that holds the space to say, I see us as one, even if you don't. That's a hard teaching, particularly when the billy clubs are up your head, or you've got the dogs, or the whatever it is that's going on. But for you to be so convinced, I like the way the King put it, that there's nothing that any man could do that could make me stoop so low as to hate him. Because when I begin to hate, I become as low as the thing that I am hating. And our big charge now is to keep living, keep loving, keep praying. And even moving, and I have to watch myself moving from my incredulous, I don't believe this stuff, or how can it, or how, just to take a breath and say, it is. This is what's happening now. And what can I do besides complain about it? What compassion can I bring? What insights can I share? How can I uplift these people? How can I pray for them and not just about them? Catch the difference in that? How can I pray for them and not just about them? How can I pray for their highest, for their security, for their knowingness, for their sense of safety, for their, you know, sense of the common good, and help to create those vibrations? Otherwise, we inadvertently become more the problem. We wind up colluding with their spiritual amnesia. It becomes like the at-risk youth that really just wants love and attention, using all their defense mechanisms. And if that's all we see, then we just reinforce. We just reinforce that. And that's what we're into now. They're like, oh, well, you already think we're this or that. We already think so. I can't pay attention to what you think. And almost like a badge of honor. Like the more progressives think that I'm out there, the more right I am. Really. It's gotten to be almost to that point. And there's something else that we need to be calling for now in how we show up, how we talk to people, the dignity, and once again, the vision. So we're not just complaining and saying what we don't want to see happen, but to say, I really want to see a world where there really is freedom of speech, where there really is mutual respect, where we really are in a democracy, where every person has value. We just got to keep putting that out there. You want to say something, Rhonda? We're going to have to close it out. You go.
For us?
Yeah. They're where the AAA is. In that parking lot. Capitol.
As we talk about all these in all the meetings, for me, it just comes down to one thing. Where is that place where that transformation, I mean, which to me would be the real conquering, to conquer the hate, to conquer the whole sense of separation. But as you talk and we all talk, it's like it all comes down to that one thing, and how to want that. I mean, how to really want that. There's so many words I could say, talk about, but how to really come to that place inside where that is what is wanted, more than any words or anything else that
Exactly.
stop that.
Exactly. We have to cultivate it. We have to so be it that there are no exceptions.
Yes.
That there are no exceptions. And quite frankly, I haven't found it yet. That I still see everybody shooting each other. I haven't, it's hard to find the place of truth. Of real mutual respect. Where you are respecting the people who don't respect you.
It's a big call.
It's a big call, but it's not going to happen with anything else.
Barbara says, I've been sharing the mayor of New Orleans speech, and it's been uplifting people and giving hope.
So beautiful.
He's just
Very powerful.
wow. Yeah, baby.
He speaks of oneness.
Yes.
No, he gets it.
Yeah.
Son of the South. He gets it.
I just want to say something about inclusion. Because when you talked about your mom and your dad, come from very big, different backgrounds, but they touched each other. They weren't isolated from each other, never to know each other. And almost everybody I know has at least one immigrant grandparent or parent. I have two. And it's our own life stories that are inclusive. It's our own life stories that are talking about differences intermingling. Why I'm strong, at least physically, is because of this intermingling. And I don't mean melting pot. I mean not inbred over and over and over again. So I think there's something to looking at our own individual life stories, just like you just did then, and say it's the differences that made me who I am.
That's pure physics.
But
You know,
we
you
need
do
to start
too
talking
much
about
inbreeding and it weakens.
I wanted to go back to something you said very early on, which was talking about Christianity being Shanghai. And I have watched since the late 70s the fundamentalists being shanghaied and the politicians who have kind of had to more and more unite with them in order to get elected. When I was young, oftentimes the fundamentalists chose not to be part of the Council of Churches, and sometimes they did. But there wasn't that control thing, and then it seems like Jerry Falwell and the silent majority, and then Francis Schaeffer, people that were promoting the fundamentalist ideas, and more of the politicians that I grew up with were either not getting elected, retiring, and being replaced by people that were making sure they were seen going to church, and if possible, a good fundamentalist church. And I'm not, what I see is not so much a regret that the fundamentalists have grown, but that they have become so much just controlling our politics. It's the politics and religion thing that I feel that in this country, but not in the world in general, because I think fundamentalists out there believe something quite different, have been shanghaied for political reasons.
Well, there's an interesting article that's out now in the New York Times, and you know, I can send it out to you. It just came out a couple of days ago, but it basically speaks to this and how the moderate Christians are stepping up to the plate. It isn't so much that these people, quote unquote, these people have taken control, as it is too much territory has been ceded. Too much acquiescence. We're finding the same thing happening in the political arena. That a lot of the people who are, oh, voting doesn't make all that much difference, or, you know, doesn't matter if I vote for Hillary or Trump or whatnot. They're waking up and smelling the coffee now. And they're like, oh, hell. You know, I didn't want to vote for Hillary because, you know, I didn't want like the same old, but it's like, oh, I wish I had the same old. Because that would sure be, you know, what the heck is going on now. There's just like a reawakening that's happening now to the fact that we really do make a difference. And not ceding anything to this group or that group or whatever, and everybody standing forth with a voice. And I'm hoping personally, and I really got to scoot out here, I'm really hoping that we do wind up with a multi-party system. I think that's the way to break the gridlock, where, yeah, most big countries, you know, don't have just two parties. So it means you got to negotiate. It's not just, you know, 51, we won, but you're constantly having to build alliances and really think about the needs of different people. And I think we're perhaps right now. I mean, that's what happened. It wasn't the Republican Party that won. That was a whole new party that came up, because the mainstream Republicans, they were rejected. They were put aside.
But I do think back in the late 70s, there was a thing, oh, look, here's all these people. Most of them aren't voting, a lot of them aren't voting, but they're all together in church every Sunday. Let's try to get our message to them and see if we can't get them on our side. That's what I mean by being shanghaied. I don't think that the fundamentalists went out and said, let us be more politically active. It was
no, they did.
And then it got to the point where people felt they had to cede in order to get the power.
It was a strategic agenda, and it becomes chicken or the egg. And we can't say like where did it start, because everybody thinks they're reacting and responding to everybody else. So if you look at the fundamentalists, they'll tell you we're responding to all these culture wars, and things were slipping away, and it was really important for us to, you know, organize, and they start locally. Let's take over the school board. Let's take over this. Let's take over that. The water district. You know, just making sure that infrastructure is built. And it really is just a question of who participates. So they were organized politically, they were organized religiously. And a lot of the more progressive people have stepped aside from religion, so they're not organized anywhere. They don't have a synergy of values, of money, of infrastructure, or whatnot anywhere. And that's got to shift, because if it's not going to happen in a religious arena, it's got to happen somewhere, because otherwise it's divide and conquer. And it's an interesting time. More than anything, I'm going to come back to, we absolutely must. We must stand on a doctrine of inclusion, unwavering. And that's going to upset everybody. That's going to upset the liberals. That's going to upset the conservatives. This absolute, unwavering, leave no one behind.
That's so much better than oneness in my own,
It's easier
in the street, in the vernacular,
Mhm.
right?
It's easier to get your arms.
Because it sounds so inclusive.
Yeah, yeah, and it is. It is. From the sort of like beloved community part, it is. With the underpinning being because of our oneness.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
the oneness with God and the oneness with everything, and that this is the natural outpouring, you know,
Correct.
of it. But as far as what sells, I agree. And, you know, we need to play with this stuff and
Because
see.
that's what progressives have hesitated to do, is sell.
Yeah.
They've hesitated to put out a message that has meaning to a lot of people, and
Mhm.
that's
To
why,
market,
a
yeah.
big hunk of why the conservatives rule, because they're strategically brilliant.
Oh, they
They're
message.
marketing
Woo!
geniuses.
They are marketing geniuses, yeah. And, you know, I think it's an arena Inner Light needs to play in.
Amen.
Really. The messaging. How do we say it? How do we package it? How do we do this?
You have to go.
All right. I beyond go.
You
So
know,
I'm going to leave all of you to pray out and sing out and all of the rest of that, but I
We'll
really,
usher you out with our song.
but I really,
give myself permission to be all I can be. I give myself permission to live passionate and free. I give myself permission to be all I can be. I give myself permission to live passionate and free. Thanks, Lisa.
Take this consciousness and multiply it. Thank you, everyone. There's no class next week. The 21st, there's no class.
Okay, okay.
Okay? Yep. So see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
2 weeks.
And that's what shines in your eye. Shines in your face.
Just how work